right, welcome to lesson 54. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you are having a look at this and going through your classes. It's H Radio 223, part-time, compiling news. We are in lesson 9 of 12. So we're nearly done with this sect or arc of our learning. So compiling news, sport, traffic, and weather beyond powerful radio. You can go look at chapter 26, integrating news and talk for radio and web, page 297 to 306. It's a short lesson. So we're going to have a bit of a chat as to, well, where the news department actually coincides with the station itself, relationships that you do have to maintain or sustain, and why these relationships are important for you as a professional. So let's get into the lesson and let's look at slide number 1. All right, so integrating news. Most audiences for news and talk radio see both news and talk elements as equally important due to talk or tight, should I say, tight budgets and restricted formats. So many full-time news talk radio newsrooms have been cut down and now may consist of only 2 to 4 people. I'm gonna obviously elaborate as I move along, but let's look at the story, quote unquote, so long. So some newsrooms work with a lot of syndicated content, and the staff is often comprised of people who must be responsible for producing, should I say, both news and talk of a hybrid that is offered to the audiences, or both, right? Or both, say, of both, a hybrid of both the talk and the news aspect. News and talk should always work together, but often don't, causing a brick wall between what happens on air in terms of the presenter's show and what elements we can make investigative journalism into talking to our listener, more talkable topics, conversation topics, call outs, interviews, feedback, that type of stuff into action. Fight the war against the competition, not each other. Audiences want to hear something that's interesting, something that's relevant, and obviously something, again, that's engaging at the end of the day. So if we look at, let's say, the quote unquote, like I said, the newsroom, we look at talk radio, we consider everyone on talk radio a journalist, right? So it's not that we don't consider them or presenters as journalists to a certain degree. So if we are, so just obviously because I've worked on music radio for so long, I'll speak from that perspective. If I think of myself and the varied thousands of the shows that I've actually hosted, I go through the same process. I make sure that, let's say, I research content that is relatable, that is relevant, that is new, that I can go and compile, content pieces from varied aspects of what I found to be relevant. Like I say, it's contextually relevant to my listener. It's also relevant to the time that is happening right now. So the times around us. Then I would also go and I would get, for example, sound bites. I would go get interviews. If I was holding an interview, I would make sure that I would go and chat to the person to see whether they are, they're the right pick. I would go and pre-interview with them to make sure that they are clear with what questions I want to have during our conversation, perhaps on air or maybe even pre-recorded. And then obviously there would be that post-production, pre and post-production that happens online. We might have questions that I put out, on social media. I might do an extended mix of the interview that doesn't happen on air, but rather in the background, when we are listening to music or whatever it is, or when we have a lot more time to spare. So maybe on IG Live, might hold this kind of like beyond, before and beyond Q&A sessions with a guest. These are all elements that are part of what makes a good broadcaster at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, journalism is at the base of all of that. Going to find out information, stories, news that is compiled, constructed, and then again it is presented to our audience to make it relevant and again enticing to their days. So going back to the newsroom, here are some do nots. If we think about the failure to communicate amongst our own teammates, where you're going to find the most support as well, the closest understanding, because you are in the same station that serves the same audience for the same purpose and reasons, right? We're gonna look at aspects like, for example, if we don't talk to programming, right, or talk and programming, right? So the news writers, reporters, and producers are always so busy, we don't want to bug them. So from a presenter point of view, from the programming side, we're looking at a very busy kind of like, it's a self-sufficient hub, our newsroom. They operate it at a very different pace that we do, and in a different style as well. But the thing is that they are like our first. That's an immediate source of information, right? And it also we can depend on what it is that they say. It means it's verified. It is also trustworthy. We know obviously the ethics that our news writers have, because that's the ethics of the station that we uphold together as a team. And so the thing is that you're going to find your relationships with the news department and the news staff to be very, 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 very rich, and valuable for you as a presenter, and a broadcaster. So that's a very that's a very incorrect point of view or angle or perspective to have when you are thinking about the news department and ourselves as the programming department. Let's say, obviously, I'm going to talk for myself, right? So it's sort of that way. Okay, the news department says that the talk hosts are in their own world and don't bother to talk or listen to us. So there is that perception once again that we might have a bit of an ego, that we definitely are self-centered. We definitely are focused also on our shows and what we want to say, as opposed to maybe the direct and not, well, I'm going to say the direct factual, the cold and clinical factual approach, which is what news is about, to present it as it is, whereas we can use angles and different aspects of stories to really promote and push certain alternative angles or ulterior angles and motives for ourselves towards our listeners. So that perception is understandable, but it's not exactly true. Because again, if you look at a presenter and you look at our ethics and what makes our profession a profession that we want to basically excel in and do best, is that we take information that is solid, that is true. Yes, it might be affected by opinion or angles or different perspectives, but everything that we do say to them is true, right? We also are not actually in our own world. We, in fact, are in touch with the world around us. Otherwise, we can't really be great presenters. So, so that's obviously a perception gone wrong. And management might say, keep them separate because news is fact, talk is opinion and entertainment. So mixing them would actually damage the news credibility. And that is obviously incorrect because again, both sides are professional, and they are professional in I say, the art and craft of investigative journalism, right? So investigative means research once again. It means angles. So if you picture a journalist, and you as BABJ students would know this. I'm talking to the wrong class, right? BABJ journalists. No, you're not. You're not. You're H radio. So yeah, you've done obviously journalism within your first or second year, so you do understand the fundamentals of going to go create a story, as well as what we have covered in the past, let's say lessons or so. Right, you would go, and even though you are gaining different angles to the story, that is all factual, right? And the thing is, yes, opinion is based on fact. So I have a fact and I garner an opinion for what it is that I want to say to somebody, right? So I can go, and if I want to push, let's say, a little bit of emotion, I can go get a soundbite from a person as opposed to a professional, to make sure that I can get the human element. We spoke about different angles. We've got so the long running stories that had different elements or different angles that constantly changed in the previous lesson as well. It's about what you see and who you speak to as well. So in inadvertently as well, or in effect, the journalist also has an ulterior motive, quote unquote, because they are going to push for the story that is also in line with what the station stands for. So if we look at example like Kaya FM, Kaya FM will be the direct supposed polar opposite of what the SABC News is. So their news department is going to offer up, quote unquote, again, just quote unquote is relevant there. It's necessary. They're gonna offer them the other version of the correct news. So let's say the SABC approaches with a certain angle, Kaya FM would retaliate or will know that their I would say news model would be directed at obviously an opinion or angle slash facts that would allow us to have different information about stories, right? When I spoke to the program manager years ago, and he said this to me, all the show, it was the news editor, excuse me, right? She said to me, her name was Portia, Bush was saying that this is our mandate. This is how we operate, and the listeners love us for it, right? For the fact that it seems like it's a little bit more hard hitting, only because it actually is sold that way. It's not necessarily that the SABC isn't hard hitting at all, and it's not seductive in any way. It's the fact that it's just that's a selling point. Um, in occurrence with Kaya, right? That's it's a bit more grittier. They do have the liberty of also doing that because they do have less, I say, structure. I say from an organizational point of view that isn't so top down like the SABC, right? The SABC also has to it's just got to like produce news that is well, I mean it's accountable to all the stations of the SABC, the radio stations, from our PBS stations to our commercial and so on, right? So there's a lot more structure, a little bit more rigidity in the the SABC structure. So she isn't wrong in saying that Kai and some of the other private stations have a little bit more liberty. That's the right word, right? Okay, but again, the thing is, so just to close this slide, that whole thing of again communication between departments and your staff, just in general. Take this as a side note, sidebar, whatever it may be. Hashtag I say, Chris says. Right, that communication in all departments will only result in a much healthier environment where you can build richer content. So when you have the support and contact and communication with sales and online and tech or whatever it may be, right? you will you will be a better broadcaster at the end of the day. And so inadvertently as well, we can speak about, the news journalist and the news department that does also interact with the rest of the station, acknowledge and also understand the benefits of having a good relationship with your comrades, right? On winning talk stations, news reporters, anchors, and hosts talk to each other, whether they're on air or they're off air, right? So, if we're looking for talkable topics on air, another way to build a relationship between the news and talk staff is for the news people to keep a lookout for discussable news items and be able to feed that in a symbiotic relationship between them and the programming department, right? So, a hard news story is definitely it's definitely a source of great content for us to be on air with, and we can also generate that into a softer talk topic that does include like extreme angles, both right, left wingers, whatever it may be, centered. It doesn't matter. Like we want to create conversation that is fair and both factual, to quote, I think EWN there, right, for our listeners, so we can then cultivate conversation around what is happening. And once again, that symbiotic relationship of actually then we we accentuating what our news department is doing by collaborating with them. Train your people to save stories about Supreme Court decisions or any polls or items about which people are likely to have strong views. So when you are prepping for a show, why not just go to your news say feed, so the news department's feed on social media, because obviously that's being updated like dynamically, so on the go. and go and see what is relevant and what they've picked out. They've gone and they've sussed out and filtered out all the quote unquote unnecessary news that is not relevant to the listener that you also work for because you're at the same station, right? And go and have a look there and see maybe I should do one of my current affairs topics and conversations, content pieces, whatever it may be, or interviews slash whatever I'm going to like. I'm gonna now pivot from, uh, from any of the content that I do see there, right? I can go have a look there and know that it's that's my first order of defense, right? So peel the onion. That is your story to find material for an in-depth open phone talk show, right? Open phone talk show. So open phone just means that we open up to conversations to the listeners, and we can obviously delve further into that particular conversation piece. The crossover talent's opinion traditionally had no place in the news. So, on the other hand, talk has no not been a forum for chronicling the facts. So basically, making sure that it goes one after the other in the right time, in the right, the right, space and place. It's true. We don't necessarily have to talk about what happened, yesterday or today in our shows or on our shows. We can reference something that happened 6 months ago and make its relevance known to our listener by the way that we compile and reconstruct that particular call out, and why that centerpiece of what happened 6 months ago might have, some relevance to, for example, like our BRICS summit that we had, just this week, you know, and we could look at it to the president's, initial comments, or, addressing Russia's actions towards Ukraine. And now, kind of how the conversation has changed because we always knew, I mean, we've always been in coalition with, the BRICS countries and, obviously the additional 9 countries that are going to be joining us. And so we can maybe create a call out around, the changing tides of our president's statements throughout the past 6 months. How much do we actually believe, in terms of where to rate this or scale this moving forward, and maybe further trust issues with the leadership of the ANC. And so it becomes a talkable topic so that, in chronological, let me open my mouth there, chronological order. We don't do that on air, whereas obviously news cannot necessarily backtrack, right? They can, in a story, as we know, reference something as a guideline as well. So mentioning President Ramaphosa's comments around the Ukraine last noted on the 22nd of March, 2023, he said that, quote unquote, qua, 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 and then and then we can go and bring in that people today have responded, the South African population today have responded in kind with a backlash that the president wasn't ready for. And then we can move on from there. I think you get the idea, right? The poise, the point of this and the poise. Why not? Let me work that in. It's a nice word. Right? The poise of a newsreader and the poise of a broadcaster, you know, is upfront, moving forward, but again, not interchangeable necessarily. Otherwise, we'd have the same person doing everything, right? This is where Dave Ross comes in with a couple of his points. We're going to have a look at those. So, if you want to integrate your News Talk product, it takes extra effort. The list of what follows is a system to develop News Talk integration, right? Obviously, working together, we've discussed the dynamics and why that is important. You need to take today and what will news do with that story or those stories? What will talk do with those stories? And are there any ideas that anyone else might have around you? Like I say, have an idea that might be sprung off for promotion. You never know that, right? Or might be integrated with a promotion So we can perhaps use newsworthy stories as questions for, I don't know, like we say, like a take a lot giveaways, given you often in exercises to do, right? We could integrate the departments in many original creative ways if we wanted to, but the focus right here is on the, bridging that gap between news and talk departments. What we want to do is obviously prospect for gold. We want to dig for gold, right? So getting the best of the best of what both our departments together can bring us. Pick the right talent for the subject matter. So we look at, let's say, the news reader or journalist, field reporter that is covering a certain angle or a certain arc of a story, has been, in the field with everyone and anyone knows everything about it, and has been following the story as it's been growing. So we'd rather talk to them because they know all the subsidiary like stakeholders that are involved, and be flexible, right? So to be flexible is to make sure that you are able to also support one another in terms of timing, in terms of production, in terms of assistance of information, taking calls, making calls, prepping, that type of stuff. If you do want to collaborate, it means two ways, right? Listen to everyone's ideas because it's not about that whole fairness thing. It's about you don't know what the next person's going to say. It might be better than what you got to say, and also what they got to say might spark a better construct of thinking, creative thinking for yourself. So brainstorming is always something that we push, right? Communicate. So communicate quite clearly. Communicate. Talk about the things that actually are relevant to what your outcome or output or your goal is for this, and make sure that you know how to use all the communication facets, right? So if there is some kind of technology or technical aspect of it, make sure that you are using that. If we have to be saving information to databases or news, so news-centered systems, right? Then you have access to that. You also know how to, again, work your way and walk your way through it. Listen to each other and create a future file. So something like, for example, lessons learned, also allows us, and I've mentioned this before in at various times, for example, like we are updating these databases, right? We definitely have fields that would say like what type of, specific industry this person or these people would also have relevance to. Perhaps maybe we could contact them or leave that information for a present in the future to go and contact them, kind of like start that line of communication again, that conversation, because they are relevant to psychology or they are relevant to money matters, they're relevant to finance, or, and I said that's very different to money matters, right? So the financial sector, whatever it may be, right? This is a JC spokesman. Okay. All right. And again, I also said that, fill up different fields, like how what is the quality of this person, what angles did they add to, and also what leads did they allow us to garner again gain from that interaction, that entire process, right? Okay, create a follow-up file. So where are they now? Did the children in custody live happily after? Okay, no, that doesn't make any sense to me. Did the child in the custody fight? There we go. Okay, now it makes sense to me. I'm just reading slower and different parts. Comma. Let me go put that in there. Custody. We go. Live happily ever after. Okay, and do not fight over guests. Oh, this one was mine. Oh, look at what you did with this. Like, if you had the understanding, the communication, the culture beforehand, like, you wouldn't even get to this point. But please, like, this is unprofessional and it's a bit childish at the end of the day. Like, you can have a conversation without raising your voice and also getting angry, I would suppose. Yes, people do things wrong, including yourself. And so just come to some conflict resolution as soon as possible, because that ain't no life for a child, right? Okay, break format when news breaks. So this is when news talk is at its best during times of national or local catastrophe, crises, emergencies. Go and break the format, man. Stop playing a song. Well, I mean, obviously finish the song, then go on air, drop the content that you had planned that is less important, relevant, captivating, whatever it may be, for that particular moment, and replace that with some breaking news. Have a procedure in place in the event of an urgent news story. So again, if we can see it coming, the news department will tend to want to develop a quote unquote like emergency bag, package that'll be put together both with production or whatever it may be. And we go and we know the process of rolling that out, who to chat to, what to do next, what to play, etc., right? Get information on air right now. We put, as you've seen in many, especially in TV, like breaking news is not an uncommon thing, and the way that obviously they break immediately to the moment that they're already in a production line to go and I say obviously broadcast, right, to newscast that particular story. They get on, they go and do it. They've got obviously the lapels and the mics in the ears that are being dictated by the production room. And then they obviously speak to field reporters and people that are, around the world or whatever it is. If it's a global catastrophe, who knows, right? They have their people in right places, and so in radio we emulate that type of environment, but obviously within, like we said the citizen journalists as well. We have the database of those. We make sure that obviously we have our field reporters, we have our correspondents, and we go on and create some great radio. Drop what you had planned and go with the breaking story. So remember to keep the audio and video files, right? Always archive everything that you do have. You never know when you're going to use that kind of remember when, or we have to refer back to, or again, someone could be using it in a show later that evening. Who knows, right? So if you have the archive audio and video accessible, you can easily repurpose magic moments on air for promos. And that is where we move to just our last kind of thoughts for the day from Bob Christopher. How do we create powerful radio points? It's kind of easy. Understand your listener, something that you're not unfamiliar with. I've told you how to do that in many, many, many lessons, both in this and the previous year. Create an emotional bond with your listener, right, and your audience. So how do we do that? We have to talk about the things that matter to them, that trigger them: love, hope, faith, happiness, anger, worry, sadness, all that type of stuff that just evokes an emotion between them. If we can build trust and a trustful bond or trust bond between us and our audience by providing them with information that matters to them, that has relevance to their decisions that they're going to make this morning or tomorrow, tonight, or in the next month or so. They can depend on us now, and we really want that. That is alive. There's no viruses on PC. Okay. As often as possible, I don't know if you saw that, but I had a pop up, so I didn't think you maybe saw that because I'm only sharing the screen, going a bit of them. So I don't think I'm going crazy. Okay. As often as possible, deliver more than you promise to listeners and advertisers. Right. So obviously stepping beyond the benchmark, kind of obviously, are you going to make an idea fly, go beyond that whole aspect of two-dimensional maybe radio, go to three-dimensional and prepare and present something quite amazing. Surround yourself with people who want to win. So the same mindset builds the same body culture, business ethos that we want to keep promoting together as a team. You'll feel if you're the weak link, or you'll feel if someone's a weak link. And the thing is that peer pressure in a team environment, a corporate environment, is much more tighter. It's much more effective, I would say, than it is in the personal world, because you have to perform. And the best way for you to stick out is by not performing, not actually overperforming, but underperforming, right? Take time to talk to them and smile at them in the hall. Definitely communication within the actual station is super important, because you have to be a team player. You have to be like brand first, right? You gotta live, eat, speak, sniff, whatever it is, the brand, right? Okay, develop personalities your listeners will love. Know that, you are, again, someone that people have to like. We work on ratings here. So do not go and, well, I don't even think you would make it this far, right? If you were not this person, because they wouldn't have selected you and put you on air. That aspect of you will easily be drowned out quite soon enough, even if you could fool people at interviews. Like, you will not fool people for very long when you are on air, right? You can't pretend to be someone that you are not in this environment, in this medium, or on this medium. Focus on the positives in the corner of your world, right? So if you are a bit stressed out for encouragement, I would say look at the strengths and the opportunities around you where you have been able to gain that success before, and go and focus on those to continue forward. Dream up fascinating promotions or special events where, like stakeholders, and you're a stakeholder, even if you are just a broadcaster, quote unquote, not management. So we like stakeholders that are, like I say, captivated by the work that they do, right? And go beyond. Like, as a broadcaster, go and suggest some ideas, to your PR and sales department, to your program manager, station manager, that you think would be great for the station. Don't just do your job and stay your lane. Try and show them that you are more than just one dimension of the workspace. Remember, it's marketing at the end of the day. So know your competition, know what they're doing, and try and do it better, right? At the end of the day. Okay. All right. So that is the end of this lesson. It's the key lecture points, and I will see you for the next one. Have a good one.